3 axles, a rooftop terrace with live plants, a gloss black body that reflects the room it's standing in like a mirror, and a face so aggressive it looks like it was designed to intimidate mountains into moving out of the way. This is an AI-generated concept motorhome. No factory, no production line, no showroom, no price tag. Just pure imagination. And honestly, that is exactly what makes it worth a full breakdown. Because when you strip away every budget constraint and every production compromise, this is apparently what a motorhome can become. What we are looking at today is a double-deck, 6-wheel luxury overlander with a rooftop outdoor living space, and an interior that you can partially see through the full-length panoramic glass. And what you can see is already absurd. Here is the plan. We are walking the exterior first, deconstructing what this design is actually communicating. Then we go inside, and I promise you, the interior logic here is more interesting than the exterior. Then powertrain, tech, and the verdict, where I will tell you the one thing I would change, and the one thing this concept genuinely gets right that almost nothing else does. Let's get into it. The front of this concept is doing something very deliberate, and you need to understand what it is. That Trident-style badge at the center of the lower fascia, flanked by angular LED running strips with amber underlighting. That is not car design language. That is military vehicle design language. It communicates dominance before this thing even moves. You feel the mass of it from the front face alone. The headlight clusters are sharp, linear, sliced into the bodywork like they were cut with a blade. There is no softness anywhere on this face. Most luxury motorhomes, even the aggressive ones, introduce a curve somewhere in the front fascia to signal approachability. This concept refuses that entirely. It is saying, this vehicle does not need your approval. And the wild thing is, it earns that attitude. That wide lower bumper with the integrated recovery points and amber light strip is not decorative. Or rather, it is decorative, but it is also telling you what this vehicle would be capable of if it were real. Approach angle, winch capacity, underbody protection. The designer has thought about what a 6-wheel overlander would actually need, and they have made those functional elements part of the visual identity. Now step back and look at the full side profile, because this is where the decision-making gets genuinely interesting. This is a double-deck design. The upper level, the rooftop terrace with glass balustrades, outdoor seating, and what appear to be live planting boxes, sits on top of a fully enclosed lower living deck. That means you are looking at a vehicle that is roughly 4.5 to 5 meters tall. That is not a motorhome. That is a land yacht. The glass-to-body ratio on the lower living deck is extraordinary. Essentially, the entire side of the vehicle from waist height upward is glass. Full length, floor-to-ceiling, panoramic glass. You can see through the vehicle and see seating, ambient lighting, what looks like a lounge configuration, all of it visible from the outside like the world's most expensive fish tank. And that is intentional. That glass is not just for the people living inside. That glass is a statement to everyone watching it drive past. The body is finished in a piano gloss black with armored silver structural cladding at the lower sections, door handles, side step supports, corner protection. The contrast between that mirror finish black and the matte silver plating is doing what good two-tone work always does. It separates the luxury language from the capability language without confusing the two. Now let's talk about why this is a 6x6, because it matters more than it looks. 3 axles, 6 massive all-terrain tires, deeply lugged, wide section, clearly sized to handle soft terrain. The wheel and tire package on this concept is not styled. It is engineered. These are not highway cruising wheels dressed up to look tough. The sidewall height, the tread pattern, the overall diameter, everything suggests the designer understood that a vehicle this heavy and this tall needs serious rubber to stay planted in anything other than a car park. The stance sits high. Ground clearance is substantial. And with 3 driven axles, the weight distribution logic actually makes sense. That upper deck adds significant mass, and spreading it across 6 contact patches instead of 4 is how you keep this thing from becoming a liability on loose terrain. I want to be honest here. This is not an aerodynamically efficient design. That flat upper deck and near vertical front face are generating drag numbers that would terrify an engineer. But what the designer has done is use the aerodynamic elements as visual architecture. The hood-mounted LED light bars, the structured overhang above the windscreen, the slight rake on the roofline. Those are drag-reducing gestures embedded in a design that prioritizes presence over efficiency. And at this positioning level, that is probably the right call. Before we go inside, that rooftop terrace. Live green plants in white rectangular planters, glass balustrade, what appears to be outdoor lounge seating, and what I believe are additional light clusters for ambient evening use. That detail is not a gimmick. That is a philosophical statement about what this vehicle is for. This concept is not saying you can survive out there. It is saying you should live out there. And there is a difference. I am saving one thing about the rear of this concept for the verdict, because there is a detail back there that I genuinely have not seen on any concept in this category before. First, let's go inside. Based on what this exterior tells us, let me do the detective work on what is almost certainly happening inside. This is one of my favorite parts of analyzing AI concepts, because the exterior proportions are a blueprint if you know how to read them. Those tires are large. Based on the wheel diameter relative to the door height, we are looking at a lower deck internal ceiling somewhere between 2.1 and 2.4 meters. That is stand up and reach above your head territory. For reference, a high-end Class A motorhome typically offers 1.98 to 2.1 meters. This concept has more headroom than most people's apartments. Through the panoramic glass, you can already see it. The lower living deck appears to be divided into a forward cockpit zone, a midship lounge, and a rear zone that, based on the depth, is likely split between a sleeping quarter and a utility core. Here is how I read the logic. The cockpit sits behind that dramatic windscreen, driver and co-pilot seats, likely captain style, with a full digital dashboard. The designer has been influenced by high-end coach builders here, not by caravan thinking. The cockpit in a concept like this should feel like a business jet flight deck, not a truck cab. Behind the cockpit, the lounge zone. Through the glass, you can see what appears to be fixed lounge seating. Creamy beige tones, wide sections, probably heat and massage capable if this were ever engineered for real. The overhead ambient lighting is warm, that amber gold tone visible from outside, which tells you the designer's intent was hotel room, not camping shelter. That distinction matters. Living in the lounge of this concept would feel like sitting in a rooftop bar that happens to be moving. Floor-to-ceiling glass on both sides means you have a 180-degree panoramic view of whatever landscape you're crossing. At night, with that amber ambient lighting reflecting in the glass against the dark outside, that experience has no comparison in the motorhome world. Natural light management in a full-glass vehicle is a real engineering challenge. You cannot sit in a glass box in a desert. So a real version of this would need dynamic tinting, the kind being used in Tesla and Boeing aircraft right now, where the glass darkens on demand without blinds. I think that is exactly what a designer at this level would specify. Based on the proportions, the kitchen almost certainly slots into the driver's side mid-rear zone, the natural position in European-influenced coach design. What I would expect from a concept with this level of visual ambition. Induction-only cooking, no gas at this positioning. Integrated refrigeration, engineered stone counters, and fully concealed appliance storage. The intent is that when the kitchen is not in use, it disappears. The surfaces retract. The appliances hide. You are not in a caravan kitchen. You are in a residential kitchen that travels. Rear of the lower deck, above the third axle. That position keeps the sleeping zone isolated from the road noise generated by the front two axles. The bed orientation would almost certainly be transverse. Width of the vehicle, which in a body this wide, gives you a proper king-size sleeping surface. view access from the rear, potentially through a rear window, and full acoustic separation from the lounge. You fall asleep in silence and wake up to whatever landscape you parked in. Water management in a vehicle this tall and this heavy is a real constraint, even in a concept. But based on the proportions, there is room for a fully enclosed wet room on one side of the utility core, separate from the bedroom, which is how this should be done. Walk-in shower. Gray water recirculation system. In a real production version of something like this, you would be looking at the same water management logic used in expedition-class vehicles: tank-to-tank recirculation, UV sterilization, multi-day autonomy. Here is what most analysis of this concept misses. The rooftop terrace is not a feature. It is a second room. It is an outdoor living room that happens to be on top of a vehicle. The glass balustrade means you have unobstructed views from elevation in every direction. You park this thing on a hillside, climb to the upper deck, and you have a 360-degree view from a height that no tent or static caravan could ever offer you. That changes the relationship between the vehicle and the landscape entirely. A concept at this level would logically include climate learning, AI-adjusted temperature zoning based on where in the vehicle you are and what outside conditions are doing. Solar roof integration not as a primary power source, but as an interior system sustainer, keeping climate control and lighting running without touching the main power reserves. Satellite connectivity. Predictive route planning. All of it exists today in separate systems. The innovation here would be integrating them into one seamless interface. If this were ever engineered for reality, and I want to be clear, it has not been, this is an AI concept. The powertrain question is genuinely interesting. A vehicle this heavy, with 3 axles, is not a hybrid candidate. It is either full diesel or full electric. And at this positioning level, in 2026, full electric is the only answer that makes sense. Here's the logic. The closest real-world engineering reference point is the Nikola Tre and the Mercedes E-Actros, heavy electric platforms designed for multi-ton commercial loads. Those platforms are already demonstrating 400 to 500 kilometers of real-world range at weight. A concept like this, with an optimized battery stack across the floor pan, using the low center of gravity to offset that tall upper deck, could realistically target 350 to 450 kilometers of driving range before a charge stop. The 3-axle configuration means you have 3 motor positions available. A dual rear axle drive configuration, 2 motors driving the rear 4 wheels, with a regenerative front axle would be the architecture I would engineer. That gives you full torque vectoring capability on loose terrain without sacrificing efficiency on highway driving. Solar roof contribution, not range. In a near-future production scenario, a roof panel this large, across both the main deck and the terrace structure, could generate enough energy to sustain interior climate, lighting, refrigeration, and connectivity systems indefinitely during daylight hours. That is meaningful off-grid autonomy even when the main battery is not being charged. Autonomous highway mode is not science fiction at this size class in 2026. The sensor array this concept would need, LiDAR, radar, forward cameras, could integrate into that front fascia without visible disruption. The vehicle is already tall enough that its sensor horizon extends further than any standard car-based autonomous system. One tech detail I genuinely think this design implies: a drone landing pad integrated into the rooftop terrace. The flat center section of that upper deck, between the planter boxes, is the right dimensions. It is the kind of detail a designer working without constraints would include, and it is the kind of detail that tells you whether a concept was thought through or just rendered. So, after all of that, what is the honest read on this concept? What it genuinely gets right? The rooftop terrace. I have to keep coming back to it, because I think it is the most resolved idea in this entire design. Every other concept in this category is competing on interior square footage, screen size, bed dimensions. This concept added a dimension that nobody else is competing in: vertical living. The idea that your motorhome can give you an elevated outdoor experience that changes based on where you park it. That is not a feature. That is an entirely different philosophy of travel. And it is executed here with real conviction. What seems impractical? That full-glass lower deck sidewall. I understand the intent. It is extraordinary from the outside and the inside. But glass at that scale on a vehicle that is supposed to access remote terrain is a thermal and a structural problem. Desert sun through that much glass turns your lounge into a greenhouse by 10 a.m. A production version would need dynamic tinting technology sophisticated enough to manage that. And right now that technology exists, but not at a cost that is practical, even at luxury pricing. That is the one element of this design that feels more like a render decision than a design decision. The most impressive detail: the body armor language at the lower section, the silver plating, the recovery geometry, the tire choice, against that piano gloss black upper body. Most luxury overlanding concepts pick a lane. They are either a luxury vehicle that can kind of do off-road, or an off-road vehicle dressed up with luxury. This concept holds both lanes simultaneously without either one feeling compromised. That balance is very hard to achieve in design, and this concept pulls it off. One thing I would change: the front badge. That trident symbol is the one element that feels borrowed from automotive design language rather than invented for this vehicle specifically. At this level of design confidence, the brand identity should be as original as the vehicle. Everything else here is doing something no one else is doing. The badge should be too. What this signals about where luxury mobility is heading. The overlanding trend in 2026 is not about roughing it. It is about refusing to compromise. Consumers who can afford serious vehicles are increasingly asking, why should I choose between capability and comfort? Why should going to the middle of nowhere mean leaving behind the things I love about how I live? This concept answers that question with a 6x6 platform and a rooftop garden. That is the direction. Not more luxury inside a box. More life available outside of it. Here is the question I want your answer on. Rooftop terrace or full glass panoramic wall? Which design decision would you keep if you could only keep one? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if breaking down concepts like this, understanding why design decisions get made, what they signal, and where they are pointing, is what you come to YouTube for, then subscribing is the most efficient way to make sure you do not miss the next one. We go deep on every concept. This is what the channel is here for.